that we have, come, and you have also seen, Peter,
Minister,
recently.
I want to find out from you. I know you've highlighted a lot of achievements, but which areas do you feel you need urgent improvement as a UPND-led administration?
Well, first of all, the areas that require improvement in terms of administration, I will be honest to say that we have to talk about the elephant in the room. I think that more effort and communication has to be done in terms of bringing our people up to speed with the energy situation in the country. The load shedding situation is devastating. Our economy is devastating. The economies of our people, many jobs have been lost, particularly those in the small and medium enterprises categories of businesses, because of this load shedding. Restaurants closing, hair, salons closing, barber shops. These things are the livelihoods, provider platforms for our people. And so, as government, we are cognizant of this reality, and we do empathize with our people. And the good news is this, Peter, the president and his administration are not just seated by, especially that we do know that our people know that the situation we are in right now is as a result of the debilitating West drought we have experienced in living memory that hit the country a year ago or so, the one for which we are still under a state of national disaster and emergency situation, the law which has not yet been revoked because we are still undergoing the effects of that particular drought. And one of them is the issue of electricity deficit, because you recall and agree that from 1964, we have been a proud, people talking about clean energy, that we are, wholly dependent on hydroelectricity, which we did not anticipate that at some point we may be faced with this challenge, despite knowing about climate change challenges. So the real problem has been that from 1964 right up to until this drought, successive governments have not invested at all in alternative power generation. And the moment we were faced with this calamity, you recall that the president urged the country to say, yes, we are now faced with the worst drought in living memory. This is a disaster, but let's flip the coin and turn this into an opportunity for us to look at opportunities for investing in alternative power generation going forward, given the realities of the moment of climate change.
Isn't that shifting blame, though? Aren't you shifting blame to the previous administrations? Because when you're in opposition, this country experienced drought. This country experienced load shedding. And you coming in, the business community, the ones you've highlighted that have lost a lot during this time, expected short-term and long-term solutions. And obviously, for you to stabilize power supply and prevent recurrences. What has the UPNA administration done in that regard?
Well, first of all, you have actually helped me answer your question when you have said that we have had load shedding before and we have had drought before.
Yes.
The question is, what have governments who have faced that drought done to avert further electricity or power deficit in future, given the circumstances those previous governments went through? The answer is zero. They just sat by and waited for another good rain season.
Is that true, Minister? Didn't the PF start other projects, Kafueloa, Gorge, adding to the grid? The MFES, the solar panels that we have in there, the solar plant that started feeding into the grid? Aren't those alternative solutions and adding to the power supply or the power output?
Peter, when you talk about Kafueloa Gorge Lower, it's not alternative power. That is hydroelectricity power.
But that's them adding to the output.
But your question was, what is it that we've done different in terms of short-term and long-term? So hydropower, enhancing hydropower generation capacity is not a solution, because as we speak now, if we had enough water, no one would have been talking about power shortage in the country. So that is not where the problem, that is not one of the solutions, because in fact, when you talk about that, you recall that as of August 2021, when President HH took over as head of state, Kafue Gorge Lower, the contractor, Sino Hydro, had actually almost demobilized. They had halted construction. They had only fired one generator out of 5, and that generator was fired in July of 2021, just advent to the general elections, and you would just imagine the stimulus or the motivation. And once President HH came in, ZESCO was put on schedule to ensure that they now were able to pay Sino Hydro outstanding bills that were making Sino Hydro unable to continue to finish that particular plant. And within a turnaround period of 12 months, November 2022, you see that the other 4 generators were fired, and President HH went to commission. So that speaks to, in fact, enhancing the capacity of a country in terms of hydropower generation. But the problem is, even if you have an expanded, like now our installed generation capacity of power, hydropower, I think it is well above 3,500 or 3,800 megawatts, which is far beyond what our national average demand is. But the issue is that even with that installed capacity, when you don't have water, there is now power you are able to produce which is sufficient. And that is why we are talking about investing in alternative power, generation. That is why the first thing the president did was to promulgate law reform in terms of dismantling the monopoly of ZESCO to generate power and be able to transmit power.
But Minister, all this you're saying now, when you were in opposition, the president himself told us this was just a management issue. It was a leadership issue, and you had the solutions to it. It was a management issue, the issue to do with power, and not sources, and not this that you're explaining today. What has changed now that you have the power to change and implement what was promised by the president and what he was voted on, which is better management of this issue to do with power?
Peter, I want to put it very categorical and clear. When the president said it was a management issue, I don't want to talk about management. He was referring to exactly these same situations. And I recall that this debate was heated around 2019. When we had that drought, which was famously quoted by our colleagues then who were in government to say this is as a result of global warming. Yes, global warming. So what did you do about that global warming? The president, in responding to global warming, when he came into office, instituted open access regime, opening up the power generation and evacuation, program for the country, thus encouraging independent power producers to set up alternative power producing plants, such as you have now seen a sporadic kind of arrangement where there are a lot of solar plants being set around and allowed by law to feed into the ZESCO power grid and be able to sell to consumers.
What's priority with this power, with these solar plants that we're seeing? First, I'll give an example of the one in Chisamba, which we were told is going to be feeding into the mines. The other plants that are going to be commissioned, that the PS for electricity told us by December, there are more that are going to come online and feed into the grid. Who's going to be priority for this, Minister? Is it the business community or the ordinary citizen?
Peter, I wish you had given me time to explain what measures government has done, short-term and long-term. But I have to flow with you. Who is going to be the target for this power which is being produced, such as the Chisamba mini grid? And correct to say that power is going to be exported to the mines. We also have CEC, Copper Belt Energy. We also have Ndola Energy producing 106 megawatts of power, which had been switched off. But as a result of the exigencies of the moment, the government allowed Ndola Energy to begin to access the primary raw material, which is diesel, to produce power, not to supply to you or to me or to our ordinary citizens, just like the example you are giving. This is what is referred to as tariff blending, where power which is produced at a high cost, such as power which is imported by independent power traders, is being sold to the mines who have the capacity to buy such power, which is expensive, and cede the power that the mines were consuming from ZESCO and let it be supplied to ordinary citizens, because ZESCO then is able to produce that power and be able to sell to its domestic consumers at a reasonable price. So when you hear that this power is going to go to the mines, it is to allow the mines to have capacity to continue to produce, but rely on power which otherwise an ordinary citizen may not have managed to consume because it's expensive. So the mine is taking the burden of consuming expensive power so that it leaves room for this power which it was consuming from ZESCO to be made available to ordinary citizens. That is what is happening out there. So this is something which I think that our citizens need to explain, to be explained to. And once we are on the same footing, we'll not have any challenge. It is the same thing, Peter, when people talk about importation of power, to say, no, we're importing power and exporting power. I think that we have to be realistic with ourselves. We've also heard, Peter, people say, no, we have companies that have been set up that seem to benefit politicians. No. The independent power producers today who are able to import power from Mozambique, from ESCOM, are actually doing us as government and as a people a great deal of service, because ZESCO, as we speak now, its financial integrity is questionable with some suppliers of power, because as we speak today, ZESCO sits on 82 million United States dollars of debt to that Kapao company of a Turkish company which is supplying power off the shores of Mozambique. But that is where we are importing power. We are supposed to be importing power. And I can now put it and lay it bare that some of the terms why ZESCO is finding it difficult to bring in sufficient power is that because they imported power in 2019 when we had that drought, and to date they have failed to pay. Now, I'm talking about $82 million. It was more than that as at 2021. But because now ZESCO has been brought back to be a viable commercial going concern, to be run as a business, to be run as an entity which is not a political outfit, ZESCO has been able to begin to eat on that debt, to reduce on that debt in a similar manner that as of August 2021, ZESCO was sitting on a debt of 590 million United States dollars owed to Mamba Collieries, which was making it impossible for Mamba Collieries to set up phase 2 thermal power plant to produce another 300 megawatts of power, which the President HH managed to bring the private sector together and mobilize resources to be able to capacitate Mamba Collieries, and now they are on schedule to the construction of that 300 megawatts of power.
From what you're telling us, Minister, now ZESCO is more viable and it's paying its debts to its debtors. This offshore power that cushioned us in 2019 when we had load shedding for many, many hours, why haven't we gone to the negotiating table and struck another deal so that people are ameliorated from this issue to do with load shedding from that company who have shown goodwill that we can pay back?
Well, I can tell you that a lot is being done right now, and I'm sure that the Minister of Energy will be addressing or updating the nation. But safe for me to say that a lot of negotiation is currently underway in the region.
How long has it taken?
In terms of power evacuation into this country? Some of it is dependent on diplomatic relations that are being smoothened. And I can tell you that we are importing power into this country through two main connectors. One through the Zimbabwe line, and also through the Namibia line. And I can tell you that government is putting every effort to ensure that we import as much power as reasonably we can afford to import, to ensure that we reduce this load shedding burden that is plaguing the nation.
Do we see an end to this issue to do with load shedding, Honorable? Because you and I have sat on this table in this studio and we've had conversations. You've had conversations with my colleagues as well. There were promises that were made, or assurances that were made by you, that we're going to be sitting at a better time as far as load shedding is concerned. And that hasn't come to pass. Do we see an end to this? Or we're just praying for for it to rain as much as it can so that we have enough water?
Well, presently, Peter, I can tell you that where government sits, government is focused under the leadership of President Hakainde Hichilema that if we're going to have good rains, that is a bonus. The trajectory is to ensure that we invest meaningfully in alternative power generation, that which can be determined by human ingenuity and endeavor, and not just waiting for rains from God. That power, which is hydropower generated, we need it like yesterday. And if we do have good rains, like already is playing out, that is a bonus to us, because notwithstanding the current load shedding situation, the economy is also expanding. There are more mines coming on board, more industries coming on board, setting up. So the power demand is also increasing. So if we do have good rains, and the meteorological experts have told us we are going to have good rains, that's a bonus for us. The focus for President HH is to ensure that the measures that have been put in place by government to ensure that we generate alternative power should come to fruition. Number one, the Mamba Corridors, 300 megawatts. Currently, we are talking about a power deficit of about 600 megawatts thereabout. Now, if you are going to have Mamba Corridors come on board within 2026, then we are talking about doing a major dent on load shedding, assuming that the situation remains the way it is. And we do have a number of solar plants that are being constructed right around the country. Chisamba, for instance, is now constructing phase 2, which the president has directed that it must be completed within 7 to 8 months to bring on board another 100 megawatts. And of course, we are alive as government to the challenges of solar, that when you have a lot of cloud cover, you may not produce as much, but that is what we have to do with at the moment. This particular president has not spared an effort, and I would challenge colleagues out there who are speaking about this issue to say, can someone tell me one, not two things that this president has not done to ensure that he and his administration respond meaningfully to this issue of power deficit in the country? I think that even in the region, remember that this is a regional problem. I think that we are leading the way in trying to mitigate the load shedding regime. And that is why when we talk about this issue, it is not really like it's a causation by government putting in place certain measures or policies that have gotten us here where we are. No. It is an issue of a drought. And in terms of that drought, when we came into power, we enhanced the capacity for hydropower generation by
Minister,
bringing on board 750 plus 12 megawatts, Cafe goes lower. So if it were not for the drought, we would not be here talking about load shedding. We'd be talking about other things. But the
Minister,
government...
I shouldn't remind you what you and the whole UPND team taught us regarding drought and global warming, and giving us examples of countries like Saudi Arabia, countries in the Far East where there's no water and they still have electricity. I think you're well aware of that. So
yes.
Is it fair to bring up those reasons to Zambians when you promised a solution and gave examples to places that literally have no water?
Peter, I think we are speaking from the same page here. We are saying that what we promised is what is being executed. For the very first time after 60 years of independence is when, as a country, we are investing meaningfully in alternative power. We are the first government to open up the monopoly of power generation and evacuation or transmission in the country. We're the first government. Before, when a move like this was made, and you recall that when this particular law reform was promulgated, there were allegations that no, HH wants to privatize ZESCO. He wants to sell ZESCO. That was not the idea. The idea was to bring the private sector also to produce power, because power is a highly demanded commodity. So why restrict its production? And that is why there is open access regime now. And also, secondly, government has actually been encouraging those who are able to put alternative power sources such as solar on their roofs, those who are able, so that you are able to win off the little power that we have to those who are unable. And I can tell you that in many residential areas, the high-cost residential areas, even when there is no power, you can actually think that there is power because many people have connected. And this is the mindset we need to begin to drive into, because in many jurisdictions in developed countries, people depend on their own power because it is cheaper to produce your own power than to buy power from a company supplying power. Okay,
Minister, in case you're just joining us right now, we have the Minister of Information and Media, Honorable Cornelius Mweetwa, on the hot seat. This is the hot seat on hot. We're live on 87.7 in Lusaka, surrounding areas, live on Mweetwa FM on 93.3 FM, live on Canela FM on 97.7 FM. Minister, there's another issue that we have to get into. Obviously, another big issue being discussed in the country, the issue to do with Constitutional Amendment Bill of 2025, popularly known as Bill number 7. But first things first, Minister, why initiate the constitutional making process now? What is driving the urgency by government to engage in this, and what timelines is government working with?
Thank you, Peter. I would like now to begin that topical issue of the moment by indicating that there is no rush, there is no hurried arrangement now to foster constitutional amendment. From the time New Dawn administration came into office, and even before we came into office, as far back as 2016, when we in Parliament voted clause by clause the whole Constitution to reject it because we felt that it did not carry the entire spirit of the aspirations of the people of Zambia. We promised the people that once we form government, we are going to amend this Constitution. That was 2016. It's not now. In 2021, there was Bill 10, which came to Parliament and had a lot of contentious clauses in it that sought to undermine not just the stability of a political environment in Zambia, but also sought to undermine the rights of citizens, such as a provision that as a civil servant, if you want to contest as an MP, for instance, in the forthcoming elections, you needed to resign 2 years before those general elections. We couldn't agree to this kind of approach of formulating laws that were inhibitive to the enjoyment of the rights by our citizens. And that is why, together with other stakeholder interest groups, we made sure that we stood firm in Parliament and shot down Bill 10 in Parliament. And once we formed government, you will recall that we came at a time when our economy was at the worst, the lowest ebb in history, as accentuated by the failure of ourselves as a country to meet our debt obligations. So the president's primary concern was to address the economy by putting in place governmental interventional measures that were intended towards economic recovery and transformation towards stability and resilience, given where we picked the economy from. And once those measures were put in place, and you know that the first 2 years, the president and his team at the Ministry of Finance did really a hard marathon to ensure that debt restructuring was attained. And from that, in 2023, members of Parliament all over us held various meetings at Parliament in the amphitheatre. We even set up a small committee of members of Parliament comprising independent MPs from the UPND, from the Patriotic Front, and that committee was a committee to look at the review of the Republican Constitution. Having agreed on non-contentious issues, and those issues which were agreed upon by all of us as members of Parliament, to say, if we wait for the usual constitutional review program where a review team or a committee is set to traverse the breadth and width of this country to canvass for views from the people, it might take time. Two, it is costly to the taxpayer, because we all are agreed right now that our economy cannot support such lavish expenditure which is avoidable. So the members of Parliament took it upon themselves that for the things that were non-controversial and those for which logic dictates that even if you did not consult, but you are relying on the fundamental mandate of you being a representative elected by people to go to Parliament to make and enact laws, you should do. And the following were agreed. Delimitation, that many members of Parliament today are called absentee MPs because of so vast expanses of constituencies that they superintend over. An example is Kanchibia constituency. An example is Kasempa constituency. 22 wards, and one ward bigger than the entire Lusaka. 7 constituencies of Lusaka put together. Those were some of the issues that were agreed that colleagues, and this particular delimitation exercise came about because MPs said, how is it that some of us who have huge constituencies receive the same CDF as those with smaller constituencies, such as Momba constituency in Monze, which has 4 wards? It still receives the same amount of money as Kasempa with 22 wards, as Choma Central with 16 wards. That was the genesis of this debate amongst members of Parliament, that let us push for delimitation, and also realizing and accepting that as members of Parliament, people want to see us as the elected officials mingle with them and get views to understand the challenges they are faced with on the ground. Yet when you go to do that, like now when we adjourn Parliament, all of us will be in our constituencies, there is no budget line for me as a member of Parliament to go and traverse the 22 wards of Choma Central constituency. It is in my pocket. The vehicle I get from Parliament as a loan, by the end of 5 years, it is scrap metal. So members of parliament said, no, yes, we are doing a service to our country, but let's be realistic. Some of the constituencies are too huge. We need to share the national cake equally so that those bigger constituencies can also have an advantage. The idea was, can we give bigger constituencies more money in CDF? And that was untenable to say at what level are we going to say this constituency also deserves this. Hence the agreement on delimitation, because when you are a constituency, then you are going to get equal amount of money without any question. The second issue was the issue of underrepresentation of women, youth, and differently abled in parliament. Today, out of 156 members of parliament, we have only 17 female members of parliament. What is that? When our constitution in terms of Article 259 and 173 talk about equal representation, and in terms of the SADC protocol, to which Zambia is a signatory, we are talking about 50-50 representation. So we are saying we can't go out there to sign international protocols which we can't give life and breath back home. And two, we are saying the reality of the moment is that women, youth, and differently abled are underrepresented in parliament. And this has been the rallying cry by the NGOCC. They are the ones who have been pushing harder than anybody else to increase the number of women in decision-making, particularly in parliament. And that's why you heard the NGOCC chairperson, I think last week, after the declaration of vacancy in the seat of Chawama, despite on one hand saying they are opposed to Bill 7, but because she was now speaking the reality of what NGOCC stands for and what she believes in, she issued a statement to say, for Chawama by-election, we are urging all political parties to field women in order to increase numbers of women in parliament. Isn't that hypocrisy? We are trying to legislate so that no one should do a woman, no one should do a youth, no one should do a differently abled a favor. We must have affirmative action through which these citizens should be able to participate in national affairs. The third one was the term limit for mayor and council chairperson, which was erroneously placed in that constitution of 2016 because a councillor and an MP are elected on the same ticket as a mayor or council chairperson. But how come there is this cap and this term limit only subsists in this country and nowhere else on this planet? It was erroneous. So members of parliament agreed that we needed to rectify this particular issue. And four, it was the composition of councils, wherein now, as members of parliament, we don't sit in those councils, yet we are expected to spearhead development in those local areas, such as disbursement of CDF, land allocation, and many other issues, bylaws, promulgation. The fifth one was to amend Article 52.6. All members of parliament are agreed to say Article 52.6, which requires a fresh nomination once a candidate has withdrawn their candidature, is a potential political hazard in an election where, just advent to those elections, a presidential candidate withdraws. A nation will be plunged into a constitutional crisis with potential for political instability. Because, as we all know, normally when a candidate withdraws, the suspicion that lingers is that it is the incumbent president who has bought this candidate to withdraw. And therefore, the animosity would be directed towards the incumbency. And we are saying, as members of parliament, agreed in September 2023 to say this needs to be rectified because it is harboring something which is making our law unpredictable. It has potential and capable of plunging our nation into anxiety if this situation is left unattended to. And the last one, I'm just dealing with the six that we agreed, was the issue to do with electoral petition. We all agreed that in terms of the electoral petition, the law just provides that the petition shall be heard within 14 days, without clarity that it should be heard and determined, because simply being heard leaves room for courts to issue judgment any other time as they wish. And you saw the challenges that we were faced with in 2016 after that presidential petition, and the anxiety the country went through, and where a court sits and to determine a matter, and then a matter is thrown out for want of time. And if we had an aggressive opposition, an opposition that doesn't put country first, we would have had street riots. But the president, the current president, then leader of the opposition, said that if you go and ban this country and you win later, what country are you going to govern? These are the issues that are the foundation of Bill 10. And to crystallize these issues, we sat as MPs and chose an independent member of parliament, the MP then for Petaoke Central constituency, JJ Banda. And the reason we chose an independent is we said we don't want the public to say this constitutional amendment is driven by UPND or is driven by PF. And the letter which I showed you here last time, and I've circulated it to dates all over social media, dated 30th October 2023, JJ Banda wrote to Madam Speaker seeking to move a motion to amend the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia. This is in public domain, and this is documentary evidence. The only thing that happened is that a few days, once he had filed that particular motion, a number of our colleagues in the opposition were suspended from Parliament for boycotting the presidential address by President HH in the like manner that we, when we're in the opposition as UPND, we boycotted a presidential opening of Parliament, and we were suspended, 42 of us. So equally, more than 40 members of Parliament of the PF were suspended. And in frustration, and I'm disappointed, I must now say this today, with Honorable Mundubile, because he's the one who led that team to begin to concoct lies at that frustration press briefing for having been suspended, and misled the nation to say, we are aware that President HH wants to sneak in secretive constitutional amendments to do away with the running mate clause, to change the term from 5 years to 7 years, to change term limit, and all those false allegations that are akin to some of our colleagues in the former ruling party. That is what brought down this initiation of constitutional amendment by members of Parliament. And now, one might ask, what was the role of the executive in all this when members of Parliament were pushing for constitutional amendment? The role of the executive, because some of us sit in Parliament as well as in the executive, we told our colleagues to say, you know, constitutional amendment is a national question. Let us go and lobby the executive if they can support. And the executive, the president, gave express support to the members of Parliament to initiate constitutional amendments that would not require the taxpayer to expend money to go and gather views based on these 6 issues that were non-controversial. And added to these, the executive just added those non-controversial issues such as the definition of a child to be in sync in the Constitution as it is in the Child Code Bill, the issue to do with Solicitor General and Attorney General to remain in office once you have an election of a new president before appointment of another. Those were the smaller inclusions by the executive in agreeing that these were non-controversial. These issues needed to be attended to. And in September of 2024, having noticed that our friends were, as we know them, unreliable, decided to walk away from a commonly agreed position to amend the Constitution on non-controversial matters without expending taxpayers' money, because we are, in terms of Article 79, the ones as parliamentarians mandated to make or amend the Constitution. The president in September, when opening Parliament, reminded the nation that there were lacunae or gaps or provisions in the Constitution that were amenable and had tendency to give more than one interpretation, that if an absurd interpretation were given life, the administration of the nation would be at peril. And you recall, he gave an example of Article 52(6), and if I recall well, for the sake of emphasis to drive the point home, he said, if this is not attended to, you can delay elections for 8 to 9 years, because you can have, as we have seen, a fleet of candidates. Like the last election we had, I think, were there 11 or more? Even those who knew that they would not even get even 1,000 votes. But, you know, that's democracy. Now, imagine that 11 candidates, each time you want to go for election, one withdraws. Of course, it will not take 8 to 9 years, but it was hyperbolically given or metaphorically given to drive the point home. And from there on, this debate has been on the table. So there has been no hurried arrangement of wanting to amend the constitution. This is our promise to the people of Zambia as far back as 2016, when we rejected the current constitution, Minister, clause by clause.
I've allowed you enough time to just explain your side of how, things have transpired from your lenses and how things transpired
from reality.
But when I put it to you, obviously this the issues to do with Amendment Bill number 7, the bill, Amendment Bill of 2025, which is Bill number 7. You quoted Amendment Bill of 2019, which is referred to as Bill number 10 as well. Similar clauses in both bills. You've laid your base there, but this was taken to court. This was argued in the Munia Zulu and Celestine Mkandila case. And the courts decided to say the manner in which this bill was came up, when it was drawn up and these clauses came up, lacked consultation. And this is an issue that was in court and the courts decided. And just yesterday, you reminded us that what has been presented to Parliament is the original bill and not the one that we got to see where the president deferred and we had a committee constituted, people handing their submissions, and then you gave us a reason yesterday that the reason why this was done was because of time. But if you look at the debates that we've had the past few months when this issue was being debated, is most stakeholders said we don't have enough time before the general elections. Let's wait until after the general elections to have this conversation, of which you came back to us yesterday and told us you don't have enough time after going through this whole process that you've highlighted, that you said you tried to avoid because government wanted to save taxpayers' money. So where do you stand here now, Minister? Are you going to disregard a court order? A court that decided to say this issue has no consultation whatsoever? Where do you stand here? What does that judgment stand? Where does that leave our judiciary after they make a decision on a very, very important matter like this one? And you handing it back over to Parliament yesterday in its original form, which was declared by the courts that it wasn't done properly.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Again, I don't want to go into legalities, but serve to indicate one express position, that the decision of the pronouncement to say Bill 7 needed more consultation, that was not the verdict of the court. That was just a pronouncement. The verdict of the court was that Bill 7 was properly before Parliament and there was nothing that could stop it. As also buttressed in the case of Law Association of Zambia and 4 others versus the Attorney General, who sought to halt the proceedings of Bill 7. And I think it is last week when the court ruled to say there is no legal impediment to stop Bill 7 proceeding. Now, let me bring you home on the issue of that particular pronouncement of the court that it actually came late in the day. It was, in fact, a night in real terms at law, because it was coming to pronounce something which had already been done. So the law cannot ask you to do that which you have already done. That is how the law operates. So, Bill number 7, the National Assembly of Zambia Constitutional Amendment Bill number 7, was presented before Parliament on 26th of March 2025. And once it was brought to Parliament, there were all these mixed reactions. And I'll tell you that the majority of the citizens agreed then, like they agree today, that we can't go to these elections with Article 52 in its current form, with the electoral petition clause in its current form, because an election is a potentially hazardous point in the lifeline of a country to hold the country together or to divide the country into disorder and chaos. Citizens agreed that these two have to be addressed, and therefore, because there were cause that Bill 7 was not widely consultative, but I'll tell you now that it was consultative in the manner that its genesis were members of Parliament.
Not according to the courts.
Now, I'm now telling you.
Not according to the courts, Minister.
Yes, they are a court. Parliament is another is another arm of government, and the executive is another arm of government. They can do what they are doing. We also have our own mandate as given by the Constitution. We have to carry out our mandate, and no other organ should stop us from carrying out our mandate.
Well, the other organ is responsible to make sure that you also adhere to what the Constitution said, and it highlighted the breaches in the Constitution in the Munia Zulu and Celestim Kadima.
And I want to tell you, there is nowhere, there is a Constitution here. I can read this Constitution for you to read. There is nowhere in this Constitution where there is a requirement for what is referred to as wide consultation. Wide consultation is merely a principle of constitutional making, which requires that for a constitution as a grand norm of the land, the most important law of the land, that for it to have legitimacy, you don't just need the legitimacy by way of the stamp of authority of Parliament to enact it, but that it requires the moral support of the citizens by way of them participating. That is what that is. It's not a law at all. It is the spirit of constitutional making and cannot be dictated upon, because in terms of Article 79 of the Republican Constitution, there is no requirement that when members of Parliament have to amend the Constitution, they should go around consulting. It is just a precedence and practice globally to consult. And so the point I'm making is that by the time that pronouncement was made, Bill 7 had already been deferred on 26th of July 2025. The pronouncement in that Munie Zulu judgment came much later to say, no, this bill you need consultation. But by that time, it had already been deferred, and the reason for deferment was to say we have heard concerns from some stakeholders that this bill was not inclusive in terms of participation. Because some people refuse to accept that what we are talking about are limited and targeted clauses that are non-controversial. And you must have been following Peter. The technical committee, when they went round, everywhere where they went, all these issues that are here are by and large agreed. No contestation. There is no one who said the clause to do with electoral petition should remain. Article 52 should remain the way it is. Everyone said this must be attended to. But the point I'm trying to buttress here is that by the time that ruling came, Bill 7 had already been deferred for consultations. And the president and the government told the nation Bill number 7 has been deferred to allow for more consultation, to allow for more input. Government has left its doors open from July 26th to 30th November 2025. Some stakeholders continued to issue statements in the media when government had deferred Bill 7 for consultations. It's only on 30th that Oasis Forum came to State House to debate or discuss around the dialogue table with the president and his team over Bill number 7 from July. And when government saw that these people appear to not want the same thing they asked for, to say, we want to input into Bill 10, we've deferred it. They are not coming through. That's why a technical committee was set up to give another platform away from the corridors of State House or government or parliament, to go and follow citizens, ordinary citizens. And the citizens, more than 11,860, spoke with unanimity about these issues we are talking about. Now, talking about the meeting of Oasis Forum on the 30th, you know it was televised in public domain, and that, of course, other issues were in camera. It was resolved that such a big group cannot thrash out and iron out nitty-gritties of what needed to be agreed upon towards convergence of consensus between government and the Oasis Forum membership. And it was agreed that a small working group be set that would be able to iron out those issues. After they have agreed, then they bring back to the bigger group, then we make progress. The following day, indeed, the working group met. On the part of government, was led by Solicitor General, Chief Government Cabinet Legal Advisor. And at that meeting, Oasis Forum pulled a letter which was dated 29th November 2025, a day before going to State House to agree to set up a working group to agree on a way forward, and just produce and say, our position is contained in this letter. And what was the content of that letter? That withdraw Bill 10.
Bill 7.
Now, I mean, withdraw Bill 7. You know, this Bill 10 thing, because it was heavily debated, I'm sure in future there's another bill. People
it's so similar. You have similar clauses also.
To Bill 7. No. If you want us to do a contrast, we can do it. There are so many things that are variance between Bill 7 and Bill 10. Now, the point I'm making is that, which is important here, is to say the Oasis Forum has a membership of organizations who say they represent people. The technical committee gave an opportunity for citizens to speak freely. I must now say, I am concerned, and I must declare interest here, that some of the members of the Oasis Forum, such as the Law Association of Zambia, to which I am a member, have never called a meeting to consult us as lawyers, to input their view, which they will present as representing Oasis Forum and therefore representing the people. They have never, yet you recall that on Bill 10, the Law Association of that time, realizing that they were representing members and holding a position, a communal position, which needed to be informed by the membership, called a consultative meeting at Hotel Intercontinental, wherein myself and Honorable Jack Mwimbo represented the opposition views, and my dear colleague, the late Honorable Tutwa Ngulube, may he so rest in peace, and Makebi Zulu were on the other side. And the Law Association of Zambia were asking us, what are your views? And also to allow the membership to input into Bill 10. It is unfortunate that that did not end to conclusion, because we were attacked by PF thugs that time. But the point I'm putting across is that LAS that time over Bill 10 called us members to go and input on Bill 10. This LAS of today has never called us. They just go there to issue statements to say, as LAS, this is our position. I know that LAS, yes, has a representative authority. But over a matter for which you need citizens or members to speak, I urge LAS not to take us for granted as members. I don't want to use the language of...
Are you asking for wide consultations as lawyers?
I am saying they should not go out there to hold a position as representing us when they have not consulted us. It is unfair.
So it goes back to the issue of wide consultation, which you're now contradicting yourself,
Minister,
if you put it like that. When you're talking about a club that you belong to, you want this wider consultation. But when it comes to the nation, you hold a different view as to what wider consultation is.
Peter, the matter is simple. I have said, over Bill 10, there was consultation by LAS. 1. 2. Over Bill 7, government has asked all interested stakeholders to come and dialogue with government. That is the reason we deferred bill number 7, because we want more consultation. 3, as government, we've set up a technical committee that went out to consult on views. So I don't agree with you when you want to put me in a corner to say I'm contradicting myself. I'm not. I am in league. I'm saying on our part as government, we have created a platform of consultation through the technical committee. And number 2, that we have asked all stakeholders, if you want a meeting with the president is there, so that we have an agreed position arising out of consultation, which I am saying my own organization is not doing. So I'm not at variance with myself. But moving forward, you asked me a very important question, which I should not lose time on by debating, LAS, which is my association. You asked me a very important question to say, yesterday we told the nation that we are bringing back bill.
I just wanted to
bill number 7 in its original form.
In its original form, and also I want to remind you that there was a time that you came back to us and told us you had no intentions of bringing back this bill into Parliament, bill number 7. And at the time when that position had changed, you would let the nation know. Those were your actual words at that presser that you had earlier in the year when this conversation was going on. What has changed then as you respond to that?
I think that let me answer that question first, because that one I don't agree. Even if you go and play a clip, there is nowhere where I said we have no intention whatsoever. As a lawyer, I guard my words. But if I were just to think about me issuing a statement in that regard, I would tell you, I would say that presently, and I remember what I was talking about was a constitution before even Bill 10, to say presently, government has no intention to amend the constitution. Presently, meaning in future, when need arises. That is exactly what I was talking about. It's the same thing with people saying, no, you said by June the load shedding will end. I said all factors being equal, with the information the experts have given us, it will be like this. So let me come to the materiality of your question, Peter. We have brought back Bill number 7 in its original form for a very simple reason. Number 1, the rules of the House as contained in these standing orders of National Assembly 2024 at Standing Order 122 provide that once a bill has been deferred or has not really deferred, has been brought to the House, you cannot introduce another bill relating to a matter similar to the bill which is already on the floor of the House. These are the provisions of Standing Order 122 of the National Assembly. So the import of that provision is that if we withdraw Bill number 7, we cannot introduce another constitutional amendment bill because it would offend the rules of conduct of business of the House. Let me just read it for clarity. Effect let me read from Standing Order 121. Deferring or withdrawing a bill. A member who sponsors a bill may defer or withdraw the bill at any time by formally writing to the Speaker stating his or her decision. This is what was done by the Honorable Minister of Justice on 26th July. And the reasons were to provide for a window of wider participation and consultation by the citizens. Standing Order 122. Effect of deferment of a bill or withdrawal. A bill that has been deferred for a period exceeding 6 months is deemed withdrawn by the member sponsoring the bill. A bill that is withdrawn shall not be presented to the House again in the same session. A bill which is substantially the same as a bill that has been withdrawn shall not be presented to the House again in the same session. So, the reason why we have brought Bill number 7 in its original form are two reasons. One, the law cannot allow us to present another bill. The citizens know that the technical committee gave a report on 1st December and also proposed a bill to amend the Constitution. But that proposed draft bill is inadmissible at Parliament because it is carrying objects similar to Bill 7. And within the session of Parliament, that 1 year, you cannot introduce a similar bill. Hence, the only vehicle available presently to amend the Constitution to ensure that we go to the general elections, having amended Article 52(6) and the electoral petition clause and other clauses as may be agreed, is Bill 7. So, if some people do not like the contents of Bill number 7, Bill number 7 cannot be altered at State House or at Cabinet or anywhere or at courts. There is only one arena where Bill number 7 can be altered or adulterated. It is at Parliament, because that is where a select committee, which has begun sitting today, will receive submissions de novo, meaning it will receive submissions afresh as though there was no technical committee's findings, as though there were no dialogue meetings between Oasis Forum and other consortium of civil society and the church that went to State House to offer solidarity. Because Parliament is now conducting its business as an independent entity. So, to amend Bill number 7, it can only take place on the floor of the House after the Select Committee has received submissions from all stakeholders. And I know that members of the Oasis Forum, such as Law Association of Zambia, the Church, NGOCC, will appear before the Select Committee of Parliament, because this is precedented. Because in the past, even where Law Association of Zambia, NGOCC, labor movement, civil society have disagreed on lawmaking with government, they have appeared before the Committee of Parliament to give their views. And examples are abound. In 2016, Law Association of Zambia, NGOCC, the labor movement, the church, were against amendment of the Constitution in the manner it was done. And I was a chairman for the Committee of Parliament that was receiving views from stakeholders. They all were opposed.
So do you, Minister, from what you've just said right now, do you intend to take the views of the technical committee, of the views that they are collected countrywide to Parliament, to that select committee?
I was coming there, Peter. I was saying that those people in 2016, just as in 2021 over Bill 10, they submitted that the bill should be withdrawn. So today when you hear members of Oasis Forum say this bill should be withdrawn, it's not the first time. In 2016, they recommended that that bill be withdrawn, but it was taken to the floor of the House and it was passed. So, in a similar manner, they will make submissions. Now, coming to the technical committee report, because the bill is already on the floor of the House and that the law prohibits us from instituting another bill with similar objects as Bill 10, unless after 1 year, which will be after the general elections, Cabinet resolved, having considered and analyzed the contents of that report and the draft proposed bill by the technical committee, that the contents of those two documents will be presented before the select committee of parliament by the technical committee members themselves as raw data that should inform and enrich bill number 7 insofar as it relates to the objects of bill number 7. The issue I'm talking about is that there should be no issues that should come de novo. That should come novel, that should come as new to be sneaked into bill number 7. That is why we are saying that issues related to and incidental to the objects of bill number 7 will now be taken by the technical committee with their proposed draft bill to go and inform and enrich bill number 7. And this is what I think needs to be understood, because I've heard news. I follow Hot FM and I followed also, I saw even on ZNBC yesterday that the narrative is ending to say, we have brought Bill 7 in its original form. The rationale should also be given. Why have we brought Bill 7? It's because we cannot craft another bill to replace Bill 7 because the law does not allow.
Minister, what you've just described right now has taken me back to the time we were having a debate to do with Bill 10. It's a similar scenario where we find ourselves with Bill 10, where the PF presented it to Parliament, people were opposing it, and then they said the select committee is looking at it, they made a few amendments and brought it back. Isn't this the same thing that you're trying to do? Make amendments to the bill, for lack of better term, through the back door?
I want to tell you, Peter, there is no back door. First of all, if you want us to go into the differences between, or contrast between Bill 7 and Bill 10, they are bound. I think that
I'm just speaking to the manner in which you are handling this as the UPND.
I'm answering you, Peter. I'm coming to that same question. I just wanted to highlight that Bill number 10, I think, had 72 issues or articles which they wanted amended. This particular bill has 13, but with only 6 crucial ones, but none controversial. There is nothing like sneaking Bill 10 through the back door when we have said that it be brought back to the floor of the House, and today the select committee has begun to sit to hear views from stakeholders, including ordinary citizens. They are at liberty to register their names at Parliament that they want to make personal representations over Bill number 7. And it will go through the normal course where everybody else is invited to come and speak to Bill number 7, and then it will be brought to the floor of the House to be determined in the usual manner that Bill number 10 was determined. It was brought for a vote and it was shot down. There's also an opportunity for Bill 7 to be shot down. That is how we make laws. And when a law is taken to be made in that, it's not sinister. And it has to be made very clear here. Peter, I have never seen a constitutional amendment process which is divorced of controversy, because it's a national question. And I will tell you, in 1996 constitutional amendment, which that time we normally referred to as the Chiruba MMD constitution, there was Article 4, I think, to do with the parentage, that when you, for you to be a candidate as president, both of your parents must have been born in Zambia. That was contentious. It was highly debated because it was said that for those at that time who were qualified to stand as presidents, their parents, when they were there, when these candidates were born, their parents, there was no country called Zambia. So how do you put a law to say your parents should have been Zambian? So that debate went on, and you saw it ended up into barring Dr. Kaunda. Come 2006 issue. Again, in 2006, you may recall that there was a push by the Oasis Forum and many other stakeholders, including opposition political parties, to have constitutional amendments ahead of the elections of 2026. And I speak with some kind of understanding and experience, Peter, because in 1996, when all that was playing out, I was a first-year student at the University of Zambia, and we were involved in the activism of constitutional agitation. Just like ahead of 2006, I was a student president at the University of Zambia, leading students together with Oasis Forum, working with Oasis Forum. In 2001, Peter, when the former president, Frederick Chiluba, wanted to go for third term, and may he so rest in peace, I was a student at the University of Zambia. When Oasis Forum called for demonstrations, you didn't see people from the church or from Law Association of Zambia or NGOCC take to the streets to go and demonstrate. It is us as students then of the University of Zambia and CBU and other institutions who took to the streets. 2 days consecutive demonstration. At the end of the second day, former President Chiluba announced that he had backed off his third term bid. I want to tell you that we are in similar circumstances. Oasis Forum is pulling in one direction. Go and check your record. You will find that there is something that has happened differently in this particular constitutional amendment. Oasis Forum, when they are opposing a constitutional amendment or a particular law, they are always with the student movement and the labor movement. Always. Because those are their most potent weapons. They themselves, they can hold press conference, say, let's go and demonstrate. Do they demonstrate? They wait for students. But this time, for a difference, students are not with the views of Oasis Forum. Students are on the other side of the aisle. That must tell you something. Students have a view, and their view is that they want more youth representation, which, for no good reason, some members of Oasis Forum are saying, no, withdraw bill number 7. And I'm actually perturbed to acknowledge this reality that Law Association of Zambia, NGOCC, church, civil society, they know the right platform where all these things will be heard. There. And in that committee, it is not a committee of UPND. As you have seen the membership, it is the first provincial representation and the party representation to create that select committee so that it is a national committee in National Assembly. Those are the people who accept certain views and take as recommendations to the whole House. I can now tell you that it is important that members of the Oasis Forum, as they do what they do, they should also look at history. What has given them strength? It is that they have carried everyone on board. They have moved with the student movement, with the labor movement, because these have the potential to go and do civil action for the government to hear. This time, the students are with the government. That is a very important point.
Minister, let's
be taken note of.
Let's get a few calls in and hear what the people have to say. It's 0974-870-877 or 0950-955-877. You're listening to the Hot Seat right here on Hot. We have the Minister of Information and Media, Honorable Cornelius Mweetwa, joining us on the show this morning.